All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I know we have a little bit of housekeeping first, so I'm going to allow you to, Selena Villegas, to jump in and kind of explain kind of what we're doing today. Selena?
Hi, everyone. Just waiting for the guidelines on the screen. So if you can give us maybe 10 seconds or so. All right, here we go, y'all. All right, so for the community guidelines, welcome again. This is Rise San Diego. We're on part 3 of 4 of our Sunrise series. So during this webinar, we're gonna have all attendees muted, but we encourage your participation. One of the ways in which you can do that is utilizing both the chat box and the Q&A box. And so generally this is located at the bottom of your screen. You'll see there's a Q&A, so you can feel free to submit any questions that you have for any single panelist or all the panelists, or if something's resonating with you, go ahead and include it into the chat. So we will not be utilizing the raise hand or audio feature in this presentation, but so again, we ask that your involvement and your participation is utilized in the chat box or Q&A. And last but certainly not least, this webinar is being recorded and is being featured on Facebook. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the president and CEO of Rise San Diego, Mr. Tony Young.
Thank you, Selena, and welcome everybody. I know lots of folks are on Facebook and we have folks here online. Just really excited to have this conversation. As you see, we got 4 Black men having this conversation, which is really important and interesting to see, and it gives me a lot of hope that we have folks who are representing us. This is about our Rise Now Sunrise series. So we've been working with Assembly Member Weber to have these discussions that relate to issues that are important to the African American community. And in this case, we are going to talk about really what's going on in the economy when it comes to employment and opportunities for training in this new world that we are living in, and we will be living in, I think, for not just the near future, but in far into the future, in this new economy. So what I did is, and my team did, we identified some of the smartest folks that we could find that are dealing with some of these issues on the cutting edge in regards to employment and the economy. We have Roshan Brady, who's the Vice President of Government, not the Vice President of Government Affairs. Roshan Brady is the Vice President of Access Incorporated. We have Marshall Anderson, the VP of Government Affairs. And we have Alex Waters, Director of Connect All. And so we have these individuals here. Welcome y'all. I appreciate you all being here, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation. How's everybody going today?
Oh, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for having us.
Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me,
Tony. So just so you all know, we wanted you all to be a part of this conversation because we thought that your perspective was really important as we start creating policies and policy recommendations for policymakers in regards to not only employment, but also in regards to the economic situation in our region as a whole. So I guess the first thing that I'd like to really talk about is what is going on out there? What are you seeing in your respective fields and your expertise? Give us some understanding of what's happening out there from an economic perspective, but also from employment and training. Marshall, what's going on?
Yeah, let's roll. What's going on, everyone? I'm Vice President of Government Affairs for the Downtown San Diego Partnership. We are the leading voice and advocate for the economic prosperity of downtown. And if you've been to downtown recently, it doesn't look extremely prosperous. The current state of downtown, pretty much in March, as soon as COVID-19 hit, we saw a lot of offices emptying out. You see, as we're going into purple tier now, those non-essential office employment centers are even more desolate. So you're walking around, there's not a whole lot of activation out there. So for our organization, it's been a real challenge trying to reimagine and really rebuild what our downtown is going to look like in the future, trying to get creative, looking at our employment overlay zone in city center and seeing how we could potentially repurpose and rezone some of those buildings and parcels to really incite economic development there. Looking at outdoor dining, we were one of the first groups that really reached out to the city and said, hey, these businesses are struggling. Can we go out into the sidewalk, into parking lots, reaching out to our state legislatures like Assemblymember Weber to ask them to grant permission for these restaurants to serve alcohol outdoors. We're also seeing a rise, and just a couple more points here, not really in homelessness itself. Those numbers have actually been okay for us. We do have a homeless outreach team that's nearly fully staffed, but really a subpopulation is where we're seeing a growth, and it's a subpopulation of folks that either can't or will not accept services. So trying to deal with them, I mean, you don't want to call the police, but then 211 isn't really the right directive. So being able to find something in the middle and get more crisis response units is something we've really been on the forefront of advocating for. And then the last piece, probably worth a deeper conversation, but downtown's really our economic and legislative center of San Diego. So you're seeing a lot of calls for social justice. A lot of those are happening downtown. Now, there have been some great outcomes from those. There have been some negative outcomes. A lot of storefronts are coming to us asking what they should be doing about their windows, if they should be boarding them up, things of that nature. So every day is a challenge, but we're very optimistic. There's some bright projects on the horizon, which I'm sure we'll get into later.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a couple of questions I do definitely want to get back to in regard, especially when it comes to social justice. That's an interesting dynamic. We obviously, downtown has a lot of small businesses. There's a lot of opportunity as we hopefully get out of COVID. So in regards to, not small businesses, Alex, I mean, what are you seeing out there, and what are our small businesses, especially African-American businesses, experiencing at this point?
From my experience, with small businesses and sort of the startups, and so I'm primarily working with folks who are at the earlier phases of building businesses. But one of the large challenges is that when someone is in the early phase of building a business, when things like EIDL or PPP kind of come down, like having that infrastructure available to be able to do it. So we've had some businesses that we worked with that they might have been operating for a couple of years, but having those standards and practices that are at a certain level to them when federal funding comes down, they have everything ready to go. They have P&Ls, they have tax returns, they have all these different kinds of things. And so that's been a challenge for some folks to make sure that they have the appropriate things structured for when aid does come down. I will sort of shout out to the SBDC and SBA because they've done a lot of great work with those small businesses to actually be able to help them. Hey, sit down, let's make sure your paperwork is set so that the moment that someone says funds are available, you can get them. You can apply immediately. Because we know another round is going to be probably coming out, and, they say maybe the end of the year or early in January, but making sure that you have all that paperwork sort of set. And so a lot of businesses are really feeling the brunt, whether it's restaurants or whether it's sort of any other kind of physical retail spaces and shops, because people just aren't going in the same kind of way. So we're seeing a lot of folks needing to pivot and adjust and shift, thinking about things like e-commerce and other areas and opportunities to sell their products and services and goods that they may not have been thinking about in the same kind of way before. But that's a big challenge to shift immediately from, Tuesday, I was selling things in my store to now Thursday, you tell me all of a sudden I need to have a Shopify site and the infrastructure and everything all set up and established to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I can imagine that's pretty challenging for your organization, because that's what you do. You support developing small businesses. And, if they have to change midstream, many of these folks have their dreams and they have their ideas, but, those things have to change.
Completely. Yeah, it's been a challenge, and we've worked with a lot of sort of earlier stage folks, but we do have some that are sort of restaurants and businesses. And so it's like, okay, what can we do now to make sure that you're just able to survive? Like, what are those things where you can bring in some streams of revenue and sources of income whether that's selling merchandise or doing other kinds of things, just to make sure that the lights can stay on until we can get to whatever the next sort of phase is. Because, COVID-19 is really decimating the community, and it's really creating a lot of pockets of uncertainty, even for those folks that are sort of gainfully employed. Like, they're worried about losing their jobs as well, let alone entrepreneurs who are kind of always at the sort of forefront and edge.
Yeah, certainly a challenge. I'm going to get back to you about that PPP stuff, because I'm sure that's a challenge for some of our small businesses. Rashawn, if you're a community member and you want to get trained for a better job, and there has to be some optimism there. That's why you're doing it. You're trying to become and make yourself better. But what are you seeing out there in regards to those opportunities, and how are these individuals who you guys train, how are they dealing with this uncertainty?
Well, thank you, Tony. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, and it's not easy. So I applaud everybody who has given their all to be able to kind of look at where they are at the start of COVID and try to change it up. We at Access, we work with a lot of different partners, in particular the San Diego Workforce Partnership, and we are involved in a number of different training programs, and that's training everyone from experienced workers, 60 and over, to the clientele that we kind of normally work with, which are 16 to 24-year-olds. So on both sides of the scale, you would think it would be a little bit different, but we did a training today with some of the experienced workers, and some of the things that they talked about are the same things that the young people are talking about. And so this is kind of like one of those times in the world where the COVID, just like Alex was saying, it has equalized a lot of things, and not necessarily in a good way. So what we're trying to do is, remain hopeful, to give people hope that it's not, don't give up, continue to try to excel and grow. One of the things that I do kind of on the side, which sounds weird, is I teach at City College as well. And I had one kind of a hybrid class right in the beginning, right, where it was kind of like half there and then half online. Well, obviously all of those classes went online, and so there was a little bit of a learning curve, even for those that in between 24 and 60, which is the population at City College, actually. So everybody has kind of adjusted and gone, and now what we're looking to do is to continue to train people and Marshall and Alex, you guys kind of talked about it, to what kind of like and Alex, you really hit on it with the gig economies, like some of the entrepreneurism that's going to have to happen. And from this, I was joking with somebody in July or August, and I was saying, we need to start looking at training people to be, or at least getting people in the frame of mind to start their businesses like a business would be dog walking, right? Like, when everybody does go back, they've been at home so long with their pets, like, it's a little bit of a gig thing, but it's just really what we're trying to do is keep everybody's minds open. One of the things that makes everybody kind of unique in this circle is we were working with a customer service class with our younger youth. And one of the things that one of the young ladies, she quit the class, and what she said was, I just can't get peace at my house. There's no room that I can go in for me to be able to really get the adequate training. And this is a person to where we had given we given them a laptop, we given her a laptop, we make it very accessible for them, but there's those little nuances that are still very difficult. And in regards to the aging workers, they have some of the same issues, which are, being able to navigate technology like we're doing right now. So I am optimistic. I think, Marshall, you said that earlier. I'm very optimistic because as I'm telling you these stories about people are still coming to get trained, right? People aren't 100% giving up and saying, well, the heck with it, I'll just wait for, a check to come. They're not doing that. What they are doing is saying to themselves, well, look, this is where I am right now. This is not where I'm going to stay. So I want to keep moving.
Well, that's great, because, I want to really go back into that. And I think all of you have something to say about that, because we know that adversity is the mother of invention, right? And There's lots of adversity that's happening right now. And I do want to keep this positive because it's really important to know that we're going to continue on as a community, as a people, and all that. So, you know, what kind of innovation are you all seeing in regards to employment, training, and the economy that really strikes you that African Americans might be able to take advantage of, or maybe they might be good examples that you can share with us when it comes to that?
I don't know if it's so much, again, I'm a political creature, so it might not be so much from a business or economy perspective, but I always try to find the silver linings whenever there's
Right.
an issue or disaster. And one of the things I found during COVID-19 is how accessible and how much almost easier it is to be an advocate, to really strive and ask for social change and engage with our elected officials. I feel like never before has it been this easy to actually reach out and contact and conversate with elected officials, their offices and staff, let alone show up to a city council meeting. You can do it all digitally now, calling in, monitoring things on Zoom, whereas earlier you'd actually have to show up in person in the middle of the day. So while it's outside the realm of the economy, being an advocate and taking an idea and making it a reality is much easier.
Yeah, I've seen that also. What do you two think? I mean, you're seeing a lot of innovation, and I know you touched on it, but I just really want to get into that because I deal with, I'm in the political realm a lot too, as you can imagine, Marshall. You know that, you've seen that. And yeah, I've seen it's a lot easier to meet with people, and it's a lot easier to engage with people when it comes to folks who are all over the region or the city or even the country. I know that's a big issue, and I don't think I don't think it'll go back. I think it'll stay that way. But what are you all
No,
seeing when it comes to innovation?
yeah, definitely. I'm in agreement with that. We've had to use, and I had the pleasure of working with Rise earlier in the summer. We had a program that was specifically targeted for the Southeast area, and when COVID hit, we were kind of stymied, right? Like, how do we do this training? Because these kids are going to come in and they're going to want to work with the county. How are we going to do that, right? So
Hmm.
we started with that question: how might we? And with the fantastic work of the Rise staff and myself, we were able to come up with a platform that allowed the young people to not only kind of Zoom partly with it, but we gave them a platform that they could actually do the work. So I think that's a fantastic thing that came out of this. At Access, we're able to provide trainings basically 24 hours, right? So
Hmm.
what we really want to do, right, is we want to train the young people that, okay, like, if you work 9 to 5, there's certain times and segments, but with the population that we work with, we know that right now in their lives, that's not always possible. What has happened now is that we put trainings out, let's say at 7 a.m. and we say, okay, look, you guys watch the videos, do all the assessments and do the activities, and we'll kind of be with you around the clock. But basically from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., we can kind of work with the young people and give them the tools that they need. It's not constricted to, well, we only have to be at this hall for 2 hours. If you don't show up there, you're not going to be able to get this. So we've been able to open that up, which has really been a great thing. And not to mention,
You think
uh,
you're all
you,
going to go back? You're going to go back to, I mean, from that, Roshan? I mean,
it,
is it going to,
it's
is it gonna,
always going to be a hybrid, Tony. I really believe that now. If you would have asked me that in April, I would have said, nah, there's no way that people are going to do this. But it's funny that you say that, because I was talking to a group earlier today, and one of the trainers, what he kept doing was saying, do you guys get it? Can you hear me? Because it was kind of like
Mhm.
we could see his face, but he couldn't see ours. And one of the social cues that we always get when we're in person, we can kind of tell when people are paying attention or when they're, but it's really, we as workshop people and as people who do this kind of work, we have to kind of get used to not getting that initial feedback. And I think once that people get done with that kind of curve and they kind of
Yeah.
like shorten that curve, yeah, I don't think this is going to go anywhere, because I think that's people's main complaints, people that are doing trainings and teaching, is that they don't get that feedback. But
Mhm.
we are going to have to kind of poise ourselves to not worry about if we look in the crowd and don't see people's heads nod, and we're just going to have to really be confident in our content and
Mm.
know that what we're doing is the right thing to make it work.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and it just made me think about the etiquette that is needed. I think what Marshall is talking about and what you're talking about, there's a certain etiquette in regards to these Zoom calls
Mhm.
and this technology that our folks need to know, right?
Yep.
And so there's very subtle things, and there's very important, just very basic things, and that's really fascinating. You brought it up, but Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'd love to piggyback on that a little bit. So I spent a lot of years in ed tech, working in
Oh,
ed tech startups and things like, and so a big piece of sort of getting over the hump was that if people had another option, they would say, well, it can never be better than what it was if it was face to face. And I think that really sort of opens up the door for so many different kinds of ways of people to do things, and not just necessarily in a sort of educational standpoint, but organizationally, right? So if people have organizations that are going to help individuals, right? And I can't get to a specific place. Well, we can all jump on a Zoom call and talk about the things that are impacting and affecting the community in ways that people may not have done before. And so I think that's a really interesting place to kind of to look at. The one thing I think with respect to sort of innovation is really going to come, and I know this is the stuff that Marshall works with, is real estate and reimagining what people can do with real estate. The last big sort of innovation, if you will, sort of startup company was like WeWork. And people always said, well, no, co-working space, nobody's going to pay to rent a desk for a half a day, right? That's never going to happen. And then slowly but surely that happened. As a lot of some of these businesses, unfortunately, are being impacted and affected, people are going to have to come up with really creative ways as to how do we actually repurpose some of the real estate that are in places so that they don't wind up just being spaces where no one's using it or no one's there, right? And so whether it's dividing up spaces to be able to use as, a community center slash, education space, or community center slash barbershop, or community center slash tax place, like there are all these different kinds of ways that you would possibly think about. Well, if I didn't have to have it as the structure that it was before, what could I use it for? What
well,
are
interesting.
absolute sort of possibilities? And
Yeah,
I think
that's gotta hit. That's gotta hit you, Marshall. That probably had. I know that had to at least brought up something in you when you heard that reimagining space, because I know that's constantly on the downtown partnerships mind, and that's just kind of a. I don't want to call it a microcosm because that's a kind of the most dense part of the city, but that's kind of what's going to happen all over. So I mean, what did that bring out with you when you heard that?
Fear and optimism. No, Alex and Rashawn a bit. I mean, you guys are speaking to some of my worst fears, and that's that folks aren't going to return. And you have these large. I mean, keep in mind, downtown we have a lot of commercial businesses that are built vertically, and when you have these empty office buildings, keep having this reoccurring nightmare of Chernobyl with the vines kind of
Yeah,
reclaiming those buildings.
yeah.
So we got to do something. And one of the things we've done at the partnership is looking at it from a land use perspective. How do we change some of the zoning to allow for more opportunities, to allow for or to inject that economic development into areas that would otherwise be going unused? So you're right on there, Tony and Alex.
Yeah, I knew that would strike you a little bit. There's someone who brought up, I can't remember which one of you, talked about, the impact of the worker and also the trainer. Like, I know I have folks who are really close to me and my family. They had to leave their job because they had to take care of their children, right? And I know all of you have seen that. And the way I look at it is that from a training perspective, it's hard to get training if you're a woman or a man who has kids and you have to stay at home because they're at school. That brings up all kinds of questions of what education is going to do. Is it going to change? Are kids going to go to school at the same time all the time like they have done traditionally? That comes all kinds of issues there. But it also comes up with the issue of reimagining space, like in regards to childcare in some of these downtown buildings where people can take their kids and be in the same building that they are. But the impact of, these communities in regards to the changing of our structure, you must see that. I would think that all of you have seen some of that. Anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think you know, as you mentioned sort of education, and I've, you know, known people in different places, so it's not specifically sort of in San Diego, but parents, you know, trying to work or trying to, you know, be able to do things, crafting like these pods of where, okay, a couple of families have agreed that, you know, they're going to make sure that they take the precautions, and then maybe a person comes in and watches the kids or does, because they're sort of around a similar age kind of thing. And I think that really what that speaks to is sort of going back to really thinking about the community, right? And so the neighbors being able to sort of help out with different kinds of things that in some cases people have kind of gotten away from. But I think that that's a real interesting place and space that there may be an opportunity for some kind of innovation in that space where, you know, you're not sending 200 kids necessarily to a big building. Maybe it's 6 or 7, and it's a teacher that comes in or somebody who's sort of working with them during the day to allow for people to actually be able to work and get training and do other things, and taking that sort of childcare burden off of people in sort of a co-op kind of model.
Mm-hmm. Sean, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can kind of speak to it from a whole different, from a lot of different levels, as being a person who teaches, who runs workshops, and also a person, you know, my daughter, I have a daughter, she has a daughter, so I have a granddaughter, right? And, you know, she's 4 years old, and she had just begun kind of like that ascension to school and starting to learn and starting to have friends. And, you know, just in one swoop, all of that was pretty much cut off. And to the point that you're making, Tony, not only did it cut off for her, and kind of, you know, I guess the time will tell what kind of if at all, the stunting that has on her and the millions of other youth that are like that. But it was an adjustment for my daughter, right? As a young mother, you know, we all kind of go through these trials, right? And from 0 to 5, right? You're everything, and then you can start letting your kids go to preschool, first grade, and then you can start kind of reinventing yourself. Well, that's not only been halted for the kids, but the parents as well, because this is a whole different swing. And then I get it from the other side, because my sister is a teacher, and she teaches 6th grade. And she, you know, you can kind of tell when I talk to her how over at some point she is of feeling like she's having to chase the kids down and turn your monitors on, turn your screen on, turn the music down, and all those kind of things, which is typical of kids that you teach, right? I mean, she would probably go through some of these things in person, but it's just different when you're doing it on when you're trying to do that online. So but I think now that we are in November and a lot of people have kind of caught up, and I know, you know, Marshall, you like you said, this is not the kind of thing that you want to hear, but Tony, you kind of alluded to this earlier, like it's going to be difficult, not only for people who don't want to go out and get sick, but they have, you know, we as humans, we have this beautiful thing that we can adapt to, right? And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, because we can adapt to bad things just like good. But as we're getting adapted to this, you know, some parts of this is just not gonna ever go away, which is the convenient part. But I still don't think that you could ever replace what you can get from meeting someone in that personal interaction. So, you know,
You can't, you know, but I'll just say is that I have to explore a little bit more on this. The education system this is an industrial age educational system that we're working on. So you have all of this, all of you all talked about it, all surrounded technology. If we didn't have technology, the type of technology we have now, and during this kind of situation, I don't know how we would have been able to continue as a country. But we do have it. We see that certain things work. And does it really make sense? I'm not sure if anybody has a comment for it, but I just want to think out loud, is that, does it even really make sense to go back to a traditional education system? You see how they're intertwined, business and work and all of that. It's this thing that we started and has developed for a long time, but I just don't know if it makes sense to continue to do it that way.
well, I will say this. One of the things that I have not heard anybody say this, I don't have any kind of insiders, and I know that, you know, it feels like school districts, as they get adapted to this, what's gonna stop somebody who lives in, a district, let's say that you need to go to Hoover, right? In Hoover, everybody knows the ADA money, everybody gets that, that's your neighborhood. What's gonna stop that person from saying, you know what, I want to go to Lincoln or San Diego, and because it's all virtual, how do those boundaries even matter anymore? Now, being the devil's advocate to that, obviously where you live is where you live and the school is the school. But I can kind of foresee in the future, people having a very serious argument. I remember when my daughter was young and having to kind of lobby because I wanted her to go to a school that wasn't in the district, and all the things you have to deal with to do that.
Yeah.
I think that that's going to be something that's going to change. It's going to have to change, because if you're doing this online, what's the difference if I go to Hoover, to Lincoln, to Morris? I mean, you're supposed to be able to get the same quality of education. So this is going to mean that the school district is really going to have to rise to a different level.
We're going to put some high schools in the downtown partnership building.
Of course, yeah, bring them on. I was actually just having a conversation. We have a great school in downtown as part of Central Library, and that's E3. Yep. And Dr. Cheryl Ward's doing some really great work there. But Rashawn, that's a really great point, and something I haven't given as much thought to, in that technology is really a great equalizer for education going forward, and it's something we should be giving more thought to. My only concern is just ensuring that we're addressing that digital divide, and folks that may not have that access or those capabilities, or might have different levels of access. I mean, we get into a situation where, now folks are talking about municipalizing Wi-Fi, and you have different devices with different capabilities. So I definitely think that's the direction we're going in. I don't know if we're there yet, but this whole situation has definitely been a catalyst for the direction we're going in.
Oh, that's interesting. I want to make sure, Alex, if you had any comment on that, because I do have a question related to what Marshall had to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say quickly, I 100% agree that I think that this is going to be the thing that completely transforms the models that people had before. I think it had already started a little bit as sort of, the Khan Academies and other sort of online learning, whether it's platforms or different kinds of things, were brought to fruition and people were using them already. I think now this just sort of exacerbates that and really pushes forward to say, okay, how creative can we actually get with making sure that it's still high quality? But if you can learn, and you can learn in pieces and parts, we know that, folks don't sit down and just take in information for 8 hours a day and then they know it. It's really the practical application. So I think that's where the internships, I think the partial learning pieces, actually putting it in practice is really going to be key, especially for like the high school age students as they continue moving forward.
Well, this is an opportunity for us to think about how do we make sure that the Black community doesn't get left behind on this. I mean, there's things that are going to change. There's things that we can advocate for to continue to develop and change. But how do we make sure that we are not left behind? And there's 4 Black men here. They're going to probably at some point have, I'm guessing, Black children. So what are you going to do? I mean, what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen? If we were given Dr. Weber or Councilmember Montgomery or Todd Gloria some recommendations on that, what could we do? Training, employment.
Well, I can definitely chime in on the training piece, because I am a 100% advocate, and I know something that we might have talked about earlier, whether it was on camera or not. The path to success doesn't always have to go through, the 4-year college. The community colleges are very, very big, and I think that is a net that we can put out in the Black community to be able to say, there is something for you to aspire to and for. There's a lot of certificate programs. There's a lot of programs that will allow you to kind of ladder your way up. And, it's like that old saying, right? Like if you're in the barbershop, you're bound to get a haircut. If you continue to just be active in those. And so those are the things that I want to push for, and I continuously push for in my community, is to be able to say, okay, well, college is all right. How about this? How about this? You're going to learn something somehow. So I'm a real advocate of not trying to push a 4-year, or you got to go to SDSU. But 90% of the people that I have talked to over the years, Alex and Marshall, that I have said that to, they wind up taking a class or two, or maybe even something with a certificate program, but they wind up catching it and then keeping going, right? Because they know that their livelihood can increase the more education that they get. So I'm a proponent of education. I don't push necessarily the college, but if I was to say, we used to be able to have these kind of forums where we invite people, but I think that the technology that we have can allow us to get into more homes. And I would be an advocate as well of being able to very seriously reduce what the internet is, right? And how much it's going to cost, so that people in the Black community, there should, we right now, the hope is that there are a great number of African Americans that are watching us right now, right? And that's something that if we were at a hall and it was 6 o'clock, they may or may not go, but this is an opportunity for them to be able to do that in their living room. But if we restrict, right, and if we don't allow this to be an easier flow, because it's easier for us because we're all, all 4 of us are in our respective places, and everybody that's watching is in theirs. But if they don't have the access to that technology, that's really all for naught. So we have to make sure that that is accessible to them. When I was a young man, I was growing up in Southeast San Diego, and I will never forget living here in San Diego. The first time I think I went to the beach, I think I was like 15 or 16, which is ridiculous. But with what we have right here, we don't have those same kind of boundaries that are real or imagined for us. So we have to be able to get this out and spread this word in this way.
Any other thoughts on that?
Second.
Yeah.
I would 100% agree. If there's 2 things that I think from just a policy perspective, and what would really help is somewhat of kind of what Marshall had mentioned before, which is the internet is not a nice to have. It's actually a necessity, right? It's the thing that you're going to need to use to be able to grow and get information, right? And so those are the kinds of things that where it's nice to say, oh, well, it's an add-on. But as people are educating themselves, free flow and access to information, right? That's really, really critical and really, really important. And so as we now have shifted completely online for most of the things, people have been talking about the digital divide for a long period of time. And now it's just gotten even more dramatic. The one great thing, though, that I could say is silver lining is sort of the rise of the smartphone, where people have basically a supercomputer in their pocket. And if they can have access to that, and we can make sure that they're able to have the internet and other kinds of things like that, they really have an opportunity to get those kind of micro training and credentialing and different kinds of programs and attend classes online. We have students in our program that literally are online when they're going through, and we have workshops and different things like that. So I think that's really critical. And then I think, which is kind of a little bit of a radical idea, but we often give people an opportunity and get paid to go to sort of a traditional educational setting. What I would love to see is people have that same opportunity to become entrepreneurs. And I mean, actually putting money in people's sort of pockets to be able to say, here's $10,000, here's $15,000, here's a grant to go be an entrepreneur and start a business, right? If you would loan it to someone to actually be able to go to a 4-year institution, I think that investment, whether they decide to keep that business or not, the number one thing that I think for most people, if they've ever been an entrepreneur, is even if they go to inside an organization to work, they are a much better employee because they understand the dynamics of how it actually works with respect to being the person that's responsible for cutting the checks and being the person responsible for making some of the decisions. And so I think it's a multiple on investment. Sometimes even more so than potentially sending someone to a 4-year degree if they don't wind up sort of completing.
So what I'm hearing is technology, as we go and make these recommendations, technology and investing in technology especially when it comes to access to technology for African Americans is very important in regards to funding and when it comes to public policy and all of that. And Marshall touched on the idea of municipalizing the internet, which that's pretty radical. I'm not saying that that's what you had recommended, but you did bring it up.
Yeah,
So
and that's
kind of what I'm hearing.
yeah, an idea that's being floated out there. I don't know how I feel about it as a policy position one
Yeah.
way or the other, but it's definitely worthy of a conversation. Sorry, don't need to interrupt. Just one thing I wanted to add on, and if there's an elected official right in front of me, I do think that space and programming around education is pretty important. The more I'm thinking about it, I mean, even if you have kids with the same devices, the kid in the one bedroom or studio apartment who's living there with their parents who are both trying to work versus the kid who can like go into his parents' office and do their homework, who has a support system, is going to be greatly different. And one of the programs we've seen eliminated is to do your homework at the library program. So ensuring that there is space created, whether it's your library or another facility, I do think that's important. And then ensuring that there's someone there for them, either digitally or in person, that can help walk them through, answer questions, almost like a tutor is vitally important as well.
Okay, I'm going to take that. And I know our RISE folks are listening, but for all of our policymakers in all of our cities to do a kind of an analysis of all of our public spaces and make sure that technology is equitable and promotes equity. That would be just kind of an assessment of libraries, parks, any of the other spaces that are under the government auspice, making sure that happens. And then how do you use those facilities to even amplify some of the issues? Literally amplify might be the case for Wi-Fi, right? So anyway, that's interesting. I would just say, want to get into a little bit about what you all are seeing in the future. So all three of you have different vantage points when it comes to what's in the future in regards to from Marshall's perspective, it's what's going on in the future for downtown, jobs, opportunities, things like that. And then each one of you all have a different perspective. What from Rashawn's perspective, what is the hot training that people should really be looking at to get into for the future? And then also, Alex, you have some ideas of, if you're going to start a business, really what does the future look like and where should you go? I want to really start off with Marshall because he has a more broader kind of perspective, at least from a regional perspective. So what are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm just waiting for Alex to bring the flying cars to downtown, but really where we're seeing from a project perspective, and we have some really great members at the Downtown Partnership who really saw an opportunity with downtown. I think the first domino, really a big tech domino to fall, was UCSD's expansion into downtown. Once companies saw that and they realized that UCSD was going to begin to cultivate talent that they could harvest, we started to see the Stockdale and the Horton project go forward. We saw IQ HQ over at the old Navy headquarters. Of course, you saw today at City Council where they're advocating for the Padres and their redevelopment of Tailgate Park. Now, those are all going to be large tech campuses. So the downtown you see today is going to be vastly different than the downtown you see in a few years. And I think right now, a lot of companies are looking to San Diego saying, well, it's not as expensive to live as in other areas. A lot of our employees want a place where they can live, work, and play. That's downtown. You don't need a car. We're 5 minutes from the airport where you can get international flights for business. We're going to become one of the larger tech hubs in the country. So that's what I'm saying when I mean the horizon is bright. There's a lot of potential there. We just need to get through this hiccup.
I'll tell you, Marshall, the part that really kind of makes me nervous is that I'm sitting right here in the middle of Southeast San Diego. I live here. When I get off this, I'm going to drive to my house and it'll take 3 minutes. But if I wanted to go downtown, it'll take me 11 minutes. So that type of, what a missed opportunity if we didn't make sure that the populations that live in Southeast San Diego that are so close to downtown, these kids that live so close in Barrio Logan also, and that they don't have they don't take the opportunity, and we don't help them get into those tech jobs. That would be a tragedy that folks will talk about for 100 years. So, I just thought that might be important to mention.
No, you're absolutely right. And I mean, that's something where we could potentially play a role because we are a connector. We have a large network. Of course, this year we've just reinvented our entire membership platform to try to incentivize more minority-owned business owners, more women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses to join the partnership and really tap into our network. One point, I'm trying to think of this under the veil, if there's an elected right in front of me, something I could pitch. Funding the Choice to Bayshore Bikeway, creating a regional connector where you can just ride your bike into downtown from City Heights, from Southeastern, would be a huge boon. It's so hard to get to and from unless you're driving. I mean, there is the trolley line, but let's make it easy on folks to come to a large employment center like our urban core.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, and obviously there's issues of gentrification also that comes with that, but that's a whole different discussion. We're going to have that discussion in a couple of weeks, so don't worry about that. Alex, what if I was a small business, I want to start a small business, what would make sense for the future for us? What are you seeing?
So, I mean, I think one, digital, right? Like, and people have talked about it for a long period of time, but if you are a small business owner and you are not online, if you do not have an online presence, if you are not sort of using the tools of being online, it's going to be very, very hard to sustain sort of long-term, especially when we think about how patterns and habits will have changed over this period of time. Like, no one knows exactly when things will go back to what they were before, but if someone was going to a space and now they haven't for a year, they may not ever go back, right? And it's not a matter of the small business not providing a great quality service, but really figuring out how to leverage those things that are online and in sort of the digital space, whether that's marketing, go and find, like, there's tons of sort of free different kinds of resources and a marketing class just to get aware of, like, what are those kinds of things that are out there. I think a lot of times with small businesses, even with the best intentions, they may say, oh, well, that's not my kind of business. Or, I have a brick and mortar. I don't need to be online in the same kind of way that an e-commerce company does, right? And that's just not true, right? It's just not true. And the companies that didn't have an online presence beforehand, you could see that they were impacted, fourfold with the companies that did have something, who were still impacted, but at least they were able to continue sort of engaging with sort of customers. And the other thing that I would say about entrepreneurs is the work of the future. I think everyone is going to wind up being, in some way, shape, or form, an entrepreneur, right? That may not necessarily mean that someone has a 1,000-person company, but little by little by little, the gig economy kind of started it. And I think this is going to sort of shift and push it more. Those side hustles are now going to become things where people are taking a bit more seriously, and they're going to structure them differently. And they're going to make sure that, no, this is a legitimate business. It's set up right. It has the appropriate structures to be able to, supplement income that potentially is lost from, jobs and organizations, because we don't know how long. We're still in the middle of it, so we don't know how long or what the long-term impact actually is going to be until it ends.
Yeah.
But
I think you're scaring Marshall again, but he's trying to fill up those buildings, man. You got a lot of buildings downtown. Rashawn, what do you think? I mean, what's the training? What type of training are we looking for in the future? I mean, back in the day, when I used to work with the Workforce Partnership, it was, folks getting prepared to go down and work at the shipyard or something like that. And you know what I mean? Not
I do.
That's going to go away, but that's kind of that was like the gold standard almost in certain respects.
You're taking me back, Tony, because I worked at the shipyard for about 5 years until my knee went out. My knees went out. So you're taking me back to that. But yeah, you know what? You are correct, and I will kind of give you guys a piece of my my memory. When I was coming out of high school, I was not motivated, right? So my main thing was my uncle worked at Teledyne Ryan or General Dynamics. So my goal was, well, my uncle's going to give me this job and then this is going to work and that's just how. But what happened is that technology, as it is right now, kind of took over, right? And it's like, okay, well, you don't just get that entry level position anymore just because you know somebody. I mean, networking is great, don't get me wrong, but you always have to have some piece of education. So I say that to say, right now we have the shortage of engineers. So I'm with Marshall on this one. I'm also with Alex on the entrepreneur, but I'll kind of start with the STEAM and the STEM. 2 years ago, we were very fortunate to get a grant from the San Diego Foundation to fund us to do a program. It was a 10-month program that we did. We just needed to take 10. We took 12, and they were 80% female. Uh, and primarily, we had high school dropouts, people that had interruptions in their high school career, and the whole goal was to expose them to STEAM and STEM, right? And how we did that was just go on tours. We built little robots. So we had all 12 of those that started out. There was about 3 of them that had family members that had went and completed college, and maybe 3 of them said that they had an interest in STEM, right? After the program was done, these 12 young ladies that didn't know each other, not only did they become friends, but when we did our exit kind of poll, about 10 of them were like, yeah, this is something I think that I could do. So we had to make it tangible. And I agree with Marshall because I like having a space that they can go. And even if there's somebody that can kind of tutor and give advice and push for those kind of things, that's paramount, especially in the African American community, and especially in STEAM and STEM, where women are very much underrepresented. So we need to make sure that we are during this pandemic, no matter what, we still have to make sure, Tony, that's to your point, we have to make sure that we continue to push those things. So if anybody that's listening that has any kind of angel funding, those are the things that we need to fund, because it's very simple. It's not difficult, right? It's simple, but it's not easy. And we just need to expose our young African American and women to the engineering. We need to do that. We need to put them in any kind of position to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And I'm with you though, Alex, because I'm the kind of cat, I'm working like the rent is always late and due, right? Like it's always like that. And what has happened now, it has made my hustle that much at my fingertips, right? I have a 24-hour clock. I wake up at 5 a.m., 4 a.m. to be work at 5 on this computer to correct papers and to do class, and then do the vice president job after that. So there are opportunities. And what has never got out of vogue, Tony, because this is the question that you were asking, is plain and simple netiquette and customer service, right?
Mm.
Because it's what can get lost when we're online like this, right? Like you want something, I have something, let's just make this deal. No, business is still business, and people still want to do business with people that they respect, trust, and like,
Mm.
right? We hired 4 people during this pandemic, and obviously all of the interviews were online. So we didn't have some of that kind of touchy feely thing. So again, like we had talked about in the beginning, we still had to kind of learn how to, gauge, judge, and all those before we made a hire. And the main thing is customer service, right? And people think customer service, oh, I'm going to work at Burger King or McDonald's. That's not the case, because an entrepreneur, to Alex's point, is like you cannot have a conversation with somebody and not respect who they are. And sometimes you would think that comes natural, but that's learned. So in
Right.
our training department, that's a very, very big part of everything that we do. No matter if we're teaching, engineering, entrepreneur, micro enterprise, no matter what
You're
it
saying
is,
you're
it's the
saying
basic customer
those
service.
soft skills that are
Soft
needed,
skills.
they still are relevant now, right?
They very much so. They still
And,
are relevant.
and then they put on top of that the technology. There's this, there's a way in which you should engage in this kind of
Mhm.
space, right? And so you put those all
Absolutely.
together. So, we have a few more minutes, y'all. And, just first, one thing I would say is that I'm so comforted that you all are in the places that you are in, you know. These 3 Black men are in places where they can advocate for us, and I say us, I'm talking about the African American community. And don't ever forget that we do appreciate you all. We know the things that you have to deal with. We know that, and thank you for being part of what we need to move us as a community forward. So it's really important. But I wanted to hear maybe some final thoughts. I mean, we might have some little fragments up there that you guys wanted to pull together before we close out. But I'll start with anybody who'd like to share any final thoughts as we move forward.
So
Sure. Oh, no, you go, Alex.
So from my standpoint, really quickly, we mentioned before sort of like what would be some policy kind of changes and shifts. And so I know that there's been some transition with like ISAs and different kinds of ways of like tying results to being able to fund program and an education standpoint. And I really think that we have to get into the Avid from a sort of governmental structure or funding structure of taking more bets. Right. It seems sort of counterintuitive, but when people really look at some of the successes that have happened in technology and in certain kinds of spaces, it wasn't because they didn't take bets. Like they took a lot of them. Right. And some of them are not going to wind up working out, but some are going to wind up hitting big. I think sometimes, especially sort of in the Black community, when people look at an investment, they look at it like it's 100% has to work. Otherwise, it's not worth taking that sort of risk. And I think that more programs, more trying things, doing some, innovative stuff that may be on the cutting edge, right? Like that may or may not work, but really kind of putting that effort and energy behind it. I would love to see just more bets, more opportunities for people to try new things, to figure out what will work.
Create a fertile ground for people to try.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Marshall or Sean, what do you all think? Any other things about policy that you might want to recommend?
I mean, we're in such an interesting time right now, and it's not just because of COVID or who's in the White House, but these calls around social change have created or really shown a light on such an important issue. And I do think there's a lot of companies and organizations looking in themselves and realizing how they can better themselves. And I do think there's a lot of opportunities out there, but that window is not going to be open forever. So it's on us to ensure that it does stay open and to encourage other folks to go for something they wouldn't normally go for. Rashawn made one really good point earlier that I didn't want to stray away from, and that is almost a re-assimilation into what the next normal is going to be. And I think for a lot of us, especially employers, it's important to look at our employees, to check in on them, to check their pulse, see how they're feeling about things, and help train them. Let's look at professional development tools. Let's get them involved in boards and commissions. Let's ensure they can speak eloquently when we're back out there talking to each other. It's that sort of investment that's going to pay off in the long run. And I think that's where we need to be spending more time.
Interesting. Dr. Sean, you got the last word here.
Certainly. So I had a conversation with one of my cousins. He lives in Oakland, and he's texting back and forth, and we were both kind of talking about how busy we were. And one of the things that he kind of left it with is, we out here chasing the paper. And I went to bed and I thought about it. I texted him the next day. I said, "Nah, my man, what we're doing is what I'm trying to do, and what I think you're trying to do is you're trying to achieve power, because that is really what's going to cause the change, right? It doesn't matter how much money, because that's kind of the singular thing, but when you can have the power to spread that out. So if when we're talking about this, and then we're talking about things in the Black community, we need to be able to positively affect people by our reach, right? And that's why they call it the network, because it's like a net, and we need to be able to spread that out. And we can't so much be worried about how much this costs and what's this going to fail. This is something that Alex was just talking about, which resonated with me very deeply. The last 2 years, we've done programs that have been specifically targeted in the Southeast community. And what happens is some of the pushback that we'll get is, no, that's too hard. Don't make this too difficult. There's a space for that. I don't want to disagree with that 100%, but what I do want to say is we cannot continue to set people up to fail by making it way too easy, because what we know is that failure sometimes it promotes a want to for next time. And you know, as we're talking to these African American men, we're on this panel right now, we've all had a hurdle that we've had to overcome, right? So you know, the STEAM and the STEM, the things that we talked about earlier, those are for everybody, but you might not, it's simple, but it just ain't easy, right? So we need to be able to you know, come to grips with the community and say that, and be able to look at that as we need to gain power in our unity, and continue that and make that grow.
That's beautifully said. Well, listen, y'all, I really do appreciate you. And, you know, we are going to take this, we're going to look at the recording and take out the best pieces that we see out of it, and make it a part of a document that we're going to present to policymakers. And, you know, you all have been really wonderful, made me so proud to hear you all talk. And thank you again for being a part of our Sunrise event. One thing I do want to say is we have some amazing sponsors, the San Diego Foundation and SDG&E. They have been there just for us to present this type of work. They support it, and they're 100% behind the conversation in regards to the Black community. And these are the types of organizations that we need to be able to continue to work with and support, because they support us. So with that, thank you. We'll have another Sunrise series in the next couple of weeks. We're going to focus on housing, and we have some pretty interesting folks to talk about that. And just so you all know, when it comes to Rise San Diego, we also do nonprofit and small business trainings. I think Rashawn kind of mentioned some of that. We have done that for a number of years, and I think we're very good at it. So if you want to get some really expert trainings in regards to nonprofits and small business development, get to risesandiego.org/nonprofit partnerships. And our next Sunrise event will be December 8th. And as I said, we're gonna focus on housing. And finally, as you all know, we want to make sure we're doing the right thing here, and we want to make sure we want to know how well we're doing. So overall, want to get you all to reply to this feedback survey and let us know how we are and how we've done, and give us your input on that. So with that, you all have a wonderful evening. Be safe, and God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony.
Take care.
Thank you, Tony.